Bonjour and bienvenue to all my Flosstube amis. Je m'appelle Chris, and this is XrossStitch, and today is Tuesday, March the 26th, 2024, and this is Flosstube number 73, and no, I do not know how to say 73 in French. 70, I don't know what that would be. 6, 7, 8, 9. I don't know. But this is Flosstube number 73. Welcome. I'm so glad to have you here with me today. It's been 3 weeks since my last video, and I told you that. I told you that I was going on a trip, and I did go on a trip, and it was a wonderful trip, and I'm going to tell you all about that trip today. If you are a new viewer, welcome. I'm glad to have you here. This is a channel primarily about cross-stitching, but today, I'm sorry, there's not going to be any cross-stitching. This is just going to be a short video, a little trip update, and to let you know what's going on in my world, and before we get back into the swing of stitching and talking about all things stitching with the advent of April. But if you are new here, I encourage you to stick around. I hope you like it enough to subscribe to me and ring the bell and all that jazz. If you are a returning neighbor, welcome back. It's good to see you again. I thought of you many times as I was in Paris, and I am so glad to be back with you, reconnecting with the neighborhood, and sharing some time. So I hope that you won't mind that I don't show you any stitching. I haven't stitched any really, well, a little bit, but not much. I did not take any stitching on the trip. I know, I heard the collective gasp, and I saw the pearls being clutched, even low across the many miles on the other side of the screen. I did not take stitching with me. We'll get to that in a minute. I'll explain why. But I hope that you are comfortable with your stitching. I hope you have a nice beverage of your choice with you. As my friend Annie says, grab your beverage and sit back, and I'm gonna tell you all about my trip to the beautiful city of Paris. So I guess I should preface all of this by saying to you, I am a great concealer of my anxiety, and I make no bones about the fact that over the years, in fact, all of my adult life, I have struggled with anxiety, generalized anxiety and depression, and I have worked through that in a variety of ways over the course of the years, and I'm doing great with it. But when you have those sorts of things, as many of you I'm sure know, it's about, it's like a roller coaster. Some days you're really good, and some days you're not so good. And those days that you're not so good, you just try to, you just chug along and put your best foot forward. And I have the ability of filming, and you don't get to see, me when I'm crying in the shower. But I'm really in a good place. But I will admit that prior to this trip, I was having a lot of anxiety about it. I've traveled extensively throughout my life, both when I was performing professionally and recreationally. I've been all over the world. I've been to Australia, Denmark, South America, a variety of countries in South America, et cetera, et cetera. I've just been to a lot of places. So I'm not afraid of traveling at all, but I had not traveled abroad since before the pandemic, not been on a plane, not been in an airport, not been in those kinds of situations. And as you might imagine, that came with a bit of trepidation prior to my journey. But it was a trip that I knew I needed to take. It was a trip I wanted to take. There was a conference that we were asked to attend, and we did. And I have to say, in retrospect, I'm so grateful that I, girded my loins and went on the trip, because we did indeed have a wonderful time. We were there for 1 week, start to finish, and it was a perfect amount of time, and it was a wonderful, wonderful trip. I'm going to share with you some of, so that's the preface to say that I really was dreading going, but you know, once I got into the flow of it, it was fine. The jam-packed shuttle in Charles de Gaulle Airport from the gate to the baggage claim was a bit of a moment, I have to tell you. But I managed through. And, you know, all was fine. All was well. So, day one, the Musée d'Orsay. I have been to Paris before. And the first time I did things, you know, like the Eiffel Tower. We went to the catacombs, which were amazing. I went to the beautiful cemetery, Père Lachaise, where you know, composers are and poets, and Jim Morrison is buried, Oscar Wilde is buried, and it is truly an attraction in and of itself. But whereas that trip was more of the outdoor attractions trip, this was more the museum trip. So we started with the Musée d'Orsay, and I have never been to the Louvre. We did go to the Louvre, but we went to the Musée d'Orsay first, and it is a wonderful, wonderful museum. It's in an old train station, and you can tell that by the architecture and what have you. But it was wonderful because it's very doable in a day. Whereas the Louvre is massive, and we'll get to the Louvre in a minute, the Musée d'Orsay was just delightful. I was surprised, and throughout my talking, I'm going to be interspersing with different pictures and just speaking about a few things that I remember. I was surprised that I was not aware that the painting of Whistler's mother is in the Musée d'Orsay. And I rounded a corner, and there she was, and I was like, well, hey, how you doing? But she was there, and it was fantastic. Musée d'Orsay, what are other pieces that I remember from that? There was a beautiful, I don't have a really good picture of it, but there was a beautiful, I suppose it was made out of a variety of different materials, but there was an enormous cross-section of l'Opéra Garnier, the Paris Opera House. And we went to the Paris Opera House, which I will talk about in a moment, but it was really neat seeing that, and then a day or so later being in the Paris Opera House. I'll pop that picture in, I'm sure you'll see it. Musée d'Orsay, of course, beautiful sculptures. They had a wonderful section for the Impressionists, and of course all of the Van Goghs were there. Not all of them, but one of his famous self-portraits was in that. Very small thing. It wasn't very big at all, but one of the more famous Van Gogh self-portraits was there, along with the Monets and beautiful pieces of art. Some of the most striking pieces of artwork there were ones that I was not familiar with, but just enormous paintings that took up an entire wall. I mean, they had to have painted these things on ladders back then. But just overwhelmingly beautiful. Beautiful sculpture, beautiful paintings. And it was a lovely, lovely day, a very doable in an afternoon sort of museum. That was the Musée d'Orsay. I'm not necessarily going in the order in which we did these things. I'm going kind of in the order of well, I'm not going in any order, so I'm just going to go next. This is we attended the Centre Pompidou. Now this is a multi-purpose, modern, massive building in Paris. And it's multi-level. There's a library on one level. There is like an arcade, I want to say, on one level for games and children and what have you. There's a big shopping level. But the top level of the Centre Pompidou is one of Paris's modern art museums. I think the largest modern art museum there. And again, it is very doable in an afternoon, in a day. It's a wonderful exhibition with some amazing things to see. There are, of particular interest to me, was that there are many, throughout, there are paintings and sculptures, what have you, but there are also actual pieces of fashion art from Jean-Paul Gaultier. This was a Jean-Paul Gaultier corset that was there on a mannequin, and a beautiful pleated Issey Miyake dress that looked like, almost like some kind of sci-fi creature. Beautiful pleats, brown, and it was, this incredibly fine fabric, just stunningly gorgeous. And then some crazy wild things too, as you're seeing here, juxtapositioned with something like a classic Christian Dior, as you're seeing now. This was from, I believe, the 50s or 60s. But this was the museum where you would encounter the Warhols, Salvador Dali, Cézanne, again, modern art. And one of the most fantastic things that I remember about this particular museum, in an enormous room, there was an enormous piece of futuristic furniture, and this was that. And man, it was so much fun. The colors and the shapes and the different vantage points. I just went crazy taking pictures in that room. It was just so beautiful. I love color, and of course, everything is done so well when they exhibit these things in these beautiful museums. So the room, is stark white, and then you have this big piece of fantastic modern art. We just loved it. That was the Centre Pompidou. Mondrian's original Mondrians were there, and what have you. So it was all just fantastic. Now, though we had gone to the Louvre previously to the actual structure and seen the exterior of it, the last time we went to Paris, we didn't visit inside the Louvre. This time we did. And we went, and the next time I go, and I will go back, because the Louvre is impossible to do in a day. The Louvre is impossible to do in a week. I think you could probably spend a month there and not see everything that there is to be seen. And we only saw a small fragment of it. But we went on a Sunday, and it was incredibly, incredibly crowded. That did not diminish the experience, really, maybe a little bit. Just because there were a lot of people, and there were a lot of people around a lot of the attractions. We did not see the Mona Lisa. I was not about to go through all that for 5 seconds in front of the Mona Lisa. Again, I want to see it, but I'll see it another time. We primarily focused on the Greek and Egyptian antiquities and the Victorian and Victorian era sculptures. I love sculpture. I love photographing sculpture. I'm a very visual person, and I really enjoy that. I like taking the photographs and bringing them home and having them printed and put up in the house, what have you. But the Louvre's amazing in and of itself, just the building of it, because it's a massive place. And of course, this was a palace, right? This was a palace and a castle and all of the above at one time or another. But the Greek and Roman antiquities were something to behold. Not only Greek and Roman, but also Babylonian, all of the ancient stuff. Rows upon rows of Egyptian sarcophagi, and the Venus de Milo was, there she was, right there. in this beautiful, large room, statues of all the Greek and Roman deities, and it was just stunningly beautiful. There are grand atriums in the Louvre where they have larger statuary, and that's something to see. You go out and there's just this open atrium with the glass skylights, and it's just overwhelming. It is to describe the Louvre, it's overwhelming in a good way, mostly. I'm not down on the Louvre. I love it. I can't wait to go back. I can't wait to see more. But in comparison to some of the smaller museums like Musée d'Orsay and Centre Pompidou, where you got to, they were just a little bit more digestible in a short amount of time. But it was a wonderful experience, and I loved it, and I cannot wait to return. I think one of my favorites, if not the favorite experience of the trip, though, was L'Opéra Garnier, the Paris Opera House. Of course, I had a great, all of us who came up in musical theater in the 90s and 2000s, well, even recently, The Phantom of the Opera by Sir Andrew Lloyd Webber was a huge deal. It was a huge deal when it premiered. It was a huge deal 10 years after it premiered, one of the longest running shows on Broadway and massively successful. And of course, as soon as it came out, we all bought the soundtracks. I don't know exactly when it was, but I know I was in high school. And of course, the photo books, and I just gobbled everything about it up. So I was very well acquainted with the opera house itself through picture, through story, and through the musical A Phantom of the Opera. But being there, oh, don't you dare choke up. I feel it. Stop. But being there, being there was another situation. It was beyond. I've never seen anything like it. Ever seen anything like it. The opera house, the auditorium itself is something to behold. And I don't completely understand. Of course, now they have, all sorts of electronic amplification with microphones and what have you. And no doubt the upholstery has changed over the years since the time, when this amazing structure was first created over the course of who knows how many years. But the auditorium is all red velvet. Burgundy, deep burgundy velvet. And acoustically, I wonder what that's like, because, sound is absorbed by soft things. For example, the Walt Disney Concert Hall in Los Angeles is mostly wooden. The walls are lined, and it is an actual tunable space, of course, state of the art, and that is all to help with the acoustics of the concert hall. But the Paris Opera House now, I don't know what it was like when, they were singing without microphones and amplification. I need to research this. But now it's all this, velvet and draperies and that stuff that just sucks up the sound. Maybe it's good for I don't know. Of course, you didn't hear a performance there, but I was struck by that. But the chandelier's amazing. And the framing around the chandelier with the Chagall, painted with Chagall, who I first learned of through Fiddler on the Roof. He did original backdrops and what have you for Fiddler on the Roof on Broadway when it premiered many, many, many years ago. Set design and all of it. But that was overwhelming. The grand ballroom was what just blew my mind with all of this. I mean, the definition of the word opulence, you know, and of course me and my practical, I'm like, how do they dust all that? I sound like my grandmother. How do they clean those things? But it was, you know, it's all pristine. There was, with chandelier after chandelier after chandelier and gold. And I mean, it's just beyond. And the ceiling painted with all of these, you know, it just, I even now lose the words. It was just stunning. The main staircase, you walk in, and that grand staircase, which I knew from the musical, they all come down in the song Masquerade. It was, again, teeming with people. So you can't really get the full unblemished experience of it all. But it's just overwhelming. Overwhelming. Of particular interest to me was, and very luckily for me, at this particular time we were visiting, there was an exhibition on Rudolf Nureyev. You may or may not know, Nureyev was a very famous ballet dancer, ballet star. He was the artistic director of the ballet, the opera ballet of Paris at l'Opéra Garnier for many years. He died very young, actually died at the age of 54, and tragically. But it was wonderful that exhibition was there, able to see his actual costumes, you know, that I have seen in photographs all these years, and to see how that I have broader shoulders than he did. It's just wild. And photographs of the ballets and examples of the set designs and what have you. It was a beautiful, beautiful exhibition. And after we left that area and walked back upstairs, I burst into tears. The whole, I'm getting teary now. The whole experience of being in that place was so, it was very sacred to me. And I just loved it. I loved everything about it. I could go on and on about the Paris Opera House, but I won't. I will stop. But it was a wonderful, wonderful highlight of our trip. Those were the major attractions and things that we saw while we were there. Of course, there was time taken up by the conference itself that we were attending. There was a lot of walking and looking and taking in the delights. There was a lot of eating, a lot of eating very delicious food. But we walked, I think we walked 35 miles, the equivalent of 35 miles over the course of the trip. So even though, you know, much bread and cheese and butter and deliciousness was being consumed, thankfully we didn't bring all that baggage back home with us, because we were walking everywhere. Our hotel was lovely. We were in the Les Halles area of the city, which is right in the center of everything. We did not go to Notre Dame because obviously Notre Dame is being renovated. But last time we visited, we did go to Notre Dame just a few months before the fire that damaged it so badly. But we were very near all of it. We could have walked anywhere we wanted to go. So it was just an amazing, amazing trip. And I am so glad that I went, and I'm glad that I'm able to share it with you, because as I was posting things on Instagram, people were really enjoying them. And that's why I wanted to do this recap video of the trip for this little installment, just to catch up with you and to share more about it, because I'm glad that you, you know, a lot of people don't travel. They don't have the the opportunities to do that, and I am more than happy to bring these photos and share with you so that you can get a taste of it yourself. And I loved every minute of it, except the shuttle in Charles de Gaulle from the gate to the baggage claim. But I'm fine. Everything's fine. We're all fine. Fine. It's all fine. So if you are new here, you know that I live in New Hampshire now after having lived in Los Angeles for many, 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 many years. And you will know that I have been talking all winter long about how much I enjoy the winter. And prior to our leaving for Paris, we were going through what I now refer to as false spring, because it had gotten, there were several days when it was getting warmer here. We were up in the 50s for a few days, and all the snow that we had on the ground during January and all of February had melted away. And it was, spring. Still no buds or flowers necessarily, all just kind of, stick season, if you will. But it was warmer. And we left, and Paris was lovely. The weather in Paris was lovely. There were, the first time we had gone many years ago, it was kind of gray and drizzly the entire time, but this time it was beautiful. There was one day of rain, but the rest, beautiful blue skies, and temperature was, you needed your jacket, but it was perfect. And, there were a couple of days that were more partly cloudy than sunny, but still it was a beautiful trip. We come home, and that night we got 2 inches of snow overnight in New Hampshire, which was followed up by rain the next day. And that eradicated all the snow because it was just a little bit. And then over the weekend, we had a winter storm. And we got, here we probably got about 6 to 8 inches of snow. And on Sunday morning, woke up to find this. 2 of our smaller pine trees got weighted down by the precipitation and snapped off. So, Sunday morning, Alabama boy here was out breaking pine branches off of a downed pine tree and dragging them to... I didn't do it all. I managed to get one of them broken up and put into a pile, and we had to have one of our dear helpers come and with his chainsaw and break up the other tree and take it all off for us. But I am hopeful that those trees will survive. As soon as the snow and ice and everything goes away, I'm going to have an arborist come look at those 2 trees, but I'd hate to lose them. I'm hopeful that we can just top them off cleanly and they will grow back around it. We used to do that with our pine trees in California. We would thin them periodically so they wouldn't get so heavy, but yes, it is still very much, or at least it's giving the illusion of winter is still very much in effect here in the beautiful state of New Hampshire. I love it. I still love the snow, and I'm not even unhappy about this particular storm. Now, April, if you snow in April, I'm going to have a different opinion. And I know it can happen. I have been told it can happen. It's rare, but it can happen. But I'm perfectly fine with March, it ending in March, and I'm ready for spring. I'm ready to get out and start, putting flowers out in the yard. But that's the other big news that has happened here in XrossStitch land. So as I mentioned, there wasn't any cross-stitching. I didn't take any stitching on the trip. I knew that we wouldn't, I know how it is when I travel. I cannot stitch on a plane. I just can't do it because my attention has to go towards keeping that plane in the air. All of my focus. It's helping the plane. It's focusing on whatever movie is distracting me. And it's also making sure that I don't spill my Sauvignon Blanc. That's important. So I don't stitch on the plane. And I knew that once we got there, you're hardly ever in the hotel room. So I didn't even take it. I got a little bit of stitching done on things here and there since our last video, but the days leading up to the trip were focused on the trip itself and packing and washing and getting my house clean for the house sitter, etc., etc. So in 2 weeks' time, there will be more stitching. We will have the results of the giveaways from the last video. We will get back to regular crisscross stitch routine, and I'm excited to do that. I am ready to start stitching again. I've been, since we got back last week, I've been doing chores around the house and, just getting business taken care of, but I'm to the point now where I can start stitching again. So next time, in 2 weeks' time, I will be back with a real, full, bona fide crisscross stitch video. I hope you enjoyed today. I hope you enjoyed my sharing my little Paris excursion with you. And until next time, take care of yourself. I hope you get some great stitching in. Be kind to everybody that you can. And I'll see you soon in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.